The ship moved through the quiet dark, a sliver of metal against an ocean of stars. Its name was the Quantum, and inside, its 4 crew members prepared to look upon a new world. On the bridge, the main screen showed a growing sphere of angry red and mustard yellow. It was exoplanet LV-223, but the crew called it Bittergale. Mira, the mission commander, studied the data scrolling next to the image. Her fingers, long and delicate with faint webbing between the knuckles, tapped the console. Her people, the Veltrani, came from a world of gentle tides and soft mists. The numbers for Bittergale were an insult to life itself. "Final atmospheric analysis is complete," she said, her voice calm but carrying to every corner of the small bridge. "All previous scans were correct. It is a confirmed Class 12 death world. No life signs. None." At the engineering station, Day let out a low grunt. He was built like stone stacked upon more stone, his broad shoulders seeming to fill his seat. His homeworld had gravity twice that of Earth's, and his bones were dense, his muscles thick cords. "What's the main flavor of poison today?" he rumbled, his voice deep. "Everything," Luna answered softly from the medical station. She was slight, with large, luminous eyes that currently reflected the planet's ominous glow. A Selenian, she was sensitive to everything, light, sound, and especially chemical imbalance. "The atmosphere is a compound of sulfuric and hydrochloric acid vapors. There are traces of hydrogen cyanide. The pressure is 20% higher than ship standard. Ultraviolet radiation levels are 30 times what would give you a burn on a beach. And the wind," she trailed off, looking at the constant, swirling patterns of crimson dust. "Abrasive particulate at hurricane speeds." The 4th member of the crew, Gene, was quiet. He was the exobiologist, the human. He leaned forward in his seat, elbows on his knees, staring at the planet with an expression that was hard to read. Not fear. It looked more like focus, like he was trying to listen to a very faint song. "Suit integrity is our only priority," Mira stated, turning her chair to face them. Her large, dark eyes were serious. "We have a 17-minute window. After that, even our reinforced suits will begin to suffer cumulative degradation from the chemical abrasion. We land, take samples from Zone Alpha, and return. No heroics. No exploration. This is a grab and go." "Understood." Day nodded, a single solid movement. Luna whispered, "Understood." Gene finally pulled his gaze from the screen and looked at Mira. "Understood." 17 minutes. They moved to the suit-up room in silence. The 4 hazmat suits stood upright in their loading racks like armored knights. They were not simple pressure suits. They were complex life support systems, each one a small, personal spacecraft designed to keep the utterly hostile universe of Bittergale at bay. The outer layer was a ceramic plastic composite to resist acid etching. The middle layer was a weave of energy-dispersing fibers to handle the radiation and extreme temperature shifts. The inner layer was a sterile, climate-controlled body glove. Day climbed into his suit with practiced ease, the servos in the legs and arms whining softly as they adjusted to support his immense mass. Luna's suit was slightly smaller, with an extra array of medical sensors on the chest panel. She moved slowly, checking every seal twice, her transparent inner eyelids blinking rapidly. A sign of anxiety, Mira methodically secured each part of her suit, the ritual of it calming her. She connected the secondary air filter, the one that would scrub out any trace of alien compounds that might slip past the primary. Her people needed very specific air. This planet's air was murder. Gene followed procedure, but with a slight difference. Under his bulky hazmat suit, he wore only his standard-issue body-conforming undersuit, a simple gray garment that covered him from neck to ankle. The others wore additional thermal and padding layers. For a human, Gene had explained once, it was about managing sweat. Too many layers were a risk. Mira had never quite understood it, but it was his protocol. "Full system check." Myra's voice came through the comms link now, clean and digital inside their helmets. Point one by one. They called out, "Day, all green. Luna, systems nominal. Gene, ready?" The inner airlock door slid shut with a final hiss. The room depressurized, and the outer door opened to reveal the landing ramp. A view of bitter gale filled the opening. It was not a still picture. It was a raging, roaring painting of violence. The sky was a dirty orange, streaked with clouds of poisonous yellow. The ground was rust red, carved into sharp canyons by acid rain. The wind was a visible force, whipping up great curtains of dust that scoured the landscape. A gust blasted against the ship, and they could feel the vibration through their boots. Tiny particles of sand ticked and scraped against their faceplates like thrown gravel. "Remember," Mira said, her voice the one stable point in the chaos. 17 minutes. Stick close. Watch your gauges." Jean took the first step out onto the ramp. The wind hit him, a physical shove against his suit. He leaned into it, his helmet tilted up, not at the stormy sky, but at the jagged horizon, at the eerie, fierce beauty of a world that wanted nothing more than to erase him. He didn't see a death world. He saw a challenge so absolute it was almost pure. Behind his visor, he smiled. It was a small, private thing. Then he stepped forward, following Mira into the red hell. The ground of Bittergale was not soft. It crunched under their boots, a sound like breaking bones made of glass. The lander sat behind them, a silver beetle in the rusty wasteland, already being dusted with fine, corrosive powder. Mira led the way, her movements careful and precise. Every step was a calculation against the wind that pushed and pulled at them. "Spread out to pattern beta," Mira ordered. Her helmet turned, the faceplate reflecting the bleak scenery. "Day, you take the ridge sample. Luna, scan the flat area for any atmospheric residue changes. Jean, with me to the mineral outcrop. Clock starts now." They moved apart, for bright spots of color in a monochrome hell. Their suit lights cut through the swirling dust, creating small tunnels of visibility. The comms were quiet except for the sound of heavy breathing and the constant, unnerving scream of the wind. Day marched toward a sharp, black ridge that stood like a broken tooth. His suit's servos worked hard in the higher gravity, but his strength was immense. He drove a core sampler into the rock. It screamed louder than the wind, a high-pitched grind that made Luna flinch even from 20 meters away. "Solid silicate," Day reported, his voice a low vibration in their ears. "Laced with iron. This place would eat a standard drill bit for breakfast." Luna knelt on the flat, cracked ground. It looked like a dried-up lake bed. She extended a slender sensor wand from her suit's arm, pushing it into a crack. Her medical monitor immediately flashed a soft, warning yellow. "The concentration of chlorine-based compounds is spiking at ground level," she said, her voice tense. "It's like a heavier gas settling in these depressions. My outer layer is showing early chemical stress. Microscopic pitting." "Noted," Mira responded. She and Jean had reached a cluster of jagged purple crystals growing from the base of a rock face. They were beautiful and deadly looking. "Reduce your exposure time there, Luna. Move to secondary position." Jean was already using his portable scanner on the crystals. The data flickered on his wrist display. "Fascinating," he murmured. The word was almost lost in the storm. "What is it?" Mira asked. She kept one eye on her own timer. 7 minutes had passed. "These crystals aren't just forming from the geology," Jean said. He tapped the display. "They're a byproduct of atmospheric chemistry. The acid rain dissolves certain base elements, then the wind deposits them here, and the UV radiation bakes them into the structure. It's a weather cycle, an active mineral weather cycle." Mira felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. On her world, weather meant water and gentle growth. Here, weather was a machine that built knives. "Take your sample and let's go," she said. Her voice was tighter now. Jean used a small laser cutter to snap off a piece of the purple crystal. He sealed it in a containment vial. As he straightened up, a particularly violent gust of wind howled down the canyon. It was a solid wall of force and red dust. It hit Luna first. She was turning to move to her secondary position, a lighter patch of ground. The wind caught her broadside. She stumbled, her slender form no match for the blast. She didn't fall, but the wind wasn't done. It carried not just dust, but larger, sharp-edged fragments of silicate rock. Scourings from the nearby cliffs point one such fragment, a flat, spinning shard the size of Myra's hand, sliced through the air. It did not hit Luna's body. It struck the flexible hose connecting her primary air tank to her suit's atmospheric processor. The connection was on her back, just below her left shoulder. There was a sharp hiss, shockingly loud over the comms. Then a second, more terrible sound. The high-pressure shriek of Bittergale's atmosphere forcing its way into Luna's suit. Breach! I have a breach! Luna's cry was half-shout, half-gasp. She twisted, trying to reach the spot on her back she could not touch. Alarms shrieked in all of their helmets. A shared, panicked sound. Luna's vital signs splashed across their displays. Her heart rate spiked. Her respiratory distress signal flashed red. Myra's training seized control. Contamination event. Full retreat to the lander. Now! She began moving toward Luna, but Day was closer. The big engineer was already lunging, his movements surprisingly fast in the heavy suit. I have her, he boomed. He reached Luna just as her knees buckled. They could hear her choking, a wet, horrible sound. The alien air, thick with poison, was filling her suit, mixing with her delicate, filtered helium-oxygen mix. It was burning her from the inside. Day wrapped his massive arms around her and lifted her off the ground. As he did, the servos in his suit's legs whined in protest at the sudden, unbalanced weight. A warning light flashed on his own display, joint stress. He began a heavy, trudging run back toward the silver lander, now 30 meters away. Gene had frozen for only a second, the sample vial forgotten in his hand. His eyes were locked on Luna's struggling form in Day's arms. Then he moved. He ran to intercept Day, to help support Luna's legs, to make the burden easier in his rush. Gene did not see the taut secondary support cable that had snapped loose from Luna's flailing arm. It whipped through the dust-choked air like a metal snake. The end of it, a broken connector, struck Jin's helmet visor with a sound like a gunshot. A crack appeared. Not a little one. A spiderweb of fractures, stark and white, exploded across the faceplate right in front of his eyes. The structural integrity of the visor was gone. Mira saw it. Her blood went cold. Gene, do not breathe. Emergency seal protocol. Now. But it was too late. The pressure difference did the rest. With a final, sickening crunch, the entire center of the visor gave way. The howling, toxic wind of Bittergale rushed into Jin's helmet, bathing his face in the planet's killing air. Time seemed to slow. For one heartbeat, then two, nothing happened. Gene stood frozen, the shattered faceplate a jagged hole to the world. The screams of the wind and the frantic voices on the comms became a distant roar. Inside his helmet, Bittergale's atmosphere replaced the clean, conditioned air. It was thick. It smelled like rotten eggs, burned metal, and something sharp and bitter he couldn't name. It stung. His eyes, exposed, watered instantly, blurring his vision with hot tears that were immediately whipped away by the gale. The skin on his face felt raw, as if scraped by sandpaper and then dabbed with vinegar. He took a breath. It was not a choice. It was a desperate, reflexive gasp as his body screamed for oxygen. The air hit his lungs like a punch. It burned, a harsh chemical burn all the way down. He coughed violently, doubling over, his hands going to his knees. Inside the suits of his crewmates, 3 voices cried out in unison, a chorus of horror. They were watching him die. But the cough was not the sound of drowning. It was the sound of irritation. His body, shocked by the assault, was reacting. His lungs constricted, then forced the alien mix back out. He took another breath, shorter, more controlled. The burning was still there, a fierce ache, but it was manageable. His vision cleared, the tears now protecting his eyes with a saline film. The raw feeling on his face settled into a warm, prickling sensation. Like a bad sunburn, he straightened up. He blinked, looking first at his own gloved hands, then through the broken visor at his crewmates. Day had stopped his run, Luna still limp in his arms, his helmet turned toward Gene, utterly still. Mira was 5 paces away, one arm half-raised as if she could somehow fix the breach from a distance. Luna's choking had softened to weak, pained gasps. Jin's mind, which had been a blank slate of shock, began to work again. The data was clear. He was breathing. He was conscious. Luna was not. "Jean, can you hear me? What is your status?" Myra's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. It was the voice of a commander clinging to procedure when the world had broken. Jean looked at her. He tried to speak, but his throat was raw. He swallowed, feeling the scrape. He reached up with both hands, took hold of the broken edges of his helmet, and gave a sharp twist. The locking mechanism, already damaged, gave way. He lifted the entire ruined helmet off his head and dropped it onto the crimson ground. It landed with a dull thud and immediately began to be buried by the blowing dust. Now his voice was his own, not filtered through a comms unit. It sounded rough, but clear against the howling wind. "Commander," he called out, "my suit is compromised. Permission to assist Luna more directly." The question was so calm, so utterly sane, that it seemed like madness. Mira could only stare. He stood there in the full fury of Bittergale, his black hair whipping wildly, his face reddening from the abrasive dust. He was in his gray undersuit from the neck down, the bulky hazmat torso and limbs looking absurd now. Acidic yellow rain began to fall, hissing as it hit the hot ground around them. A few drops spattered against his cheek and bare neck. They sizzled for a fraction of a second, and Jean flinched, wiping at them with the back of his glove. Pink marks were left behind, like mild chemical burns, but his skin did not melt. It just reddened, angry and alive. Day found his voice first. "Do it!" he roared, his speaker grating with static. "Her weight is straining my suit's actuators." Permission was given in the breaking of the spell. Jean moved. He didn't run back to the lander for shelter. He strode toward Day and Luna. He worked with quick, efficient motions. He unclipped the useless remains of his own suit's torso unit, letting it fall away. He was left in just his simple gray shorts and thin undershirt. The wind bit into his exposed arms and legs, raising goosebumps. The toxic rain felt like hot pins. He came up beside Day and slid his arms under Luna's legs, taking the weight. Day adjusted his grip under her arms. Together, they moved toward the lander, a three-person unit shuffling through the storm. Mira followed, her mind a storm of its own. She scanned him with her suit's external bioreader. The data made no sense. His heart rate was elevated but steady. His respiration was rapid but efficient. His skin temperature was fighting to regulate against the corrosive elements. It was as if his entire body was at war. A loud, chaotic but organized war. They reached the ramp. Jin's bare feet, now coated in red dust, crunched on the metal. They carried Luna into the small airlock. Mira hit the cycle button. The outer door closed, shutting out the scream of Bittergale. A different silence fell, heavy with shock and the sound of Luna's ragged, pained breathing inside her ruined suit. Decontamination sprays hissed, washing the outside world away. The inner door opened to the lander's main cabin. Only then, in the controlled, clean light, did they fully look at Jean. He was breathing deeply, calming himself. His skin was a patchwork of angry red marks and fine scratches from the dust. His eyes were bloodshot. He was here. He was whole. He looked from Luna, now being gently laid down by Day, to Myra's helmeted face. He saw his own reflection in her visor. A man standing in shorts, in a lander meant for full hazmat gear, on the most deadly planet they had ever set foot on. He gave a small, shaky cough and wiped his mouth. He looked out the viewport at the continuing storm, at the planet that had just tried to kill them all. A strange, almost peaceful expression settled on his damaged face. "You know," he said, his voice a rough whisper, "it stings, but on my grandmother's farm, when the winter snows finally melted and the wind came down from the mountains, it had a bite to it. Carried the smell of wet soil and old pine needles." He took another breath of the lander's clean, processed air. "Feels like spring." The trip back to the Quantum was a silent, tense blur. Jean sat wrapped in a sterile thermal blanket, shivering slightly as the adrenaline faded. Day and Mira worked in a wordless, frantic dance over Luna. They could not remove her contaminated suit in the small lander. They simply secured her to a medical cot and pumped it full of pure Selenian air mix, hoping to flush the poison from her lungs. Myra's eyes kept drifting from Luna's vital signs to Jean. He looked pale beneath the red marks. He coughed occasionally, a dry, rough sound. Each cough made Day's huge shoulders tense. They were waiting for him to collapse, for some delayed, horrible reaction to take him. It never came. Once the lander docked with the Quantum, the silence broke into controlled chaos. "Full biohazard protocol," Mira ordered, her voice echoing in the ship's main corridor. "Day, get Luna to the medical bay, isolate the room. Jean, straight to decontamination. No arguments." Jean didn't argue. He walked on his own, his bare feet leaving faint reddish prints on the clean deck plates. He entered the decontamination chamber, a stark white room with spray nozzles and scanning arches. The door hissed shut behind him. Through the thick glass, Mira watched. The scanners came to life, painting Jin's body with grids of light. Data began to flood the screen on Myra's side. She expected to see systemic failure, organ distress, cellular collapse. What she saw instead was a furious, blazing activity. His skin was shedding its outermost layer at an incredible rate, sloughing off cells damaged by acid and abrasion. Beneath it, new skin was forming so fast the scanners could almost watch it happen. His lungs were the epicenter of a storm. Specialized cells were aggressively binding to the inhaled toxic particles, packaging them and moving them out. His liver and kidneys were processing a cocktail of chemicals that would have solidified the organs of any other species she knew. His immune system was not just responding. It was celebrating. It had identified a dozen novel alien threats, spores, prion, weird fragments of complex molecules carried on the dust, and was systematically tearing them apart. His white blood cell count was soaring. He wasn't dying. He was adapting. In real time. The decontamination sprays washed the last of the red dust from his skin, revealing a patchwork of healing pink skin underneath. The door opened. Jean stepped out, still wrapped in the blanket. He looked tired, deep down tired, but his eyes were clear. "The readings?" Mira started, then stopped, unable to find the words. "Are they bad?" Jean asked, his voice still a little hoarse. "No," Mira said slowly. "They are impossible. Your body is fighting Bittergale like it's a mild infection. It's winning." Jean just nodded, as if this was an expected result. "Can I see Luna?" In the medical bay behind a clear quarantine barrier, Luna lay on a bed. Her suit was off. Her delicate, gray-blue skin was marred by angry red burns around her nose and mouth. A respirator covered her face, helping her breathe. Her large eyes were closed. Day stood like a statue beside the barrier, his huge fists clenched. "The med scanner says her bronchial passages have severe chemical burns," he reported, his voice tight. "She will heal, but it will take time." And she was exposed for less than a minute. He turned his head to look at Jean. "You breathed it for over 5. You carried her through it." Jean placed a hand on the clear barrier, looking at his friend. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Sorry?" Day rumbled. "For what?" "For not dying. For not being the one hurt," Jean said. He meant it. Later, in the ship's small mess hall, Mira sat across from Jean. He was drinking a large glass of water. She had the full biological scan data on a tablet between them. "Explain it to me, Jean, not as a report. Explain what happened down there." Jean put his glass down. He thought for a long moment. "My world, Earth, it's not a gentle place. It never was. The weather changes fast. Volcanoes fill the air with ash. Germs evolve quickly. Our ancestors didn't develop perfect protection. They couldn't hide in a stable environment. So they developed frantic adaptation. A messy, overeager immune system. A liver that can process 1,000 different poisons because our ancestors had to try new plants to survive. Skin that heals quickly because cuts and scrapes were a daily danger. He pointed to the data on the tablet. My body saw Bittergale not as an instant death sentence. It saw it as a very, very bad day back home. A day with extreme UV radiation, some toxic gas leaks, and a sandstorm full of strange allergens. My systems went on high alert. They are screaming at me right now. I will probably have a fever tonight. My joints ache, but it's just my body doing its job. It's a generalized, chaotic response. It works against a lot of things, but not perfectly against anything. Mira stared at him. A bad day? Jean, it is a Class 12 death world. Kills everything. It would have killed my ancestors too, Jean admitted. But over thousands of generations, the ones who survived the bad days passed on their chaotic, overprepared biology. We are not invincible. We are just stubborn. In a very noisy, internal way. He looked toward the medical bay. Your people, Mira, you evolved in a stable, beautiful sea. Your body expects harmony. When it finds poison, it has no defense. It is a precision instrument thrown into a rock crusher. My body is the rock crusher. It's not better. It's just different. Mira leaned back, the weight of it settling on her. Humanity's legendary toughness was not a shield. It was a roar. A loud, painful, messy process of survival. It was biology that treated an alien hellscape as a mere seasonal irritation. She looked at the planet on the main viewer, a swirling red marble of death. A place that required the best technology in the galaxy to even visit for 17 minutes. And one of her crewmates had walked in it wearing shorts. Not because he was a hero, but because, to the frantic ancient army inside him, it just felt like spring. The fever hit Jean that night, just as he'd predicted. It wasn't a gentle warmth. It was a dry, baking heat that came from deep inside his bones. He lay on his bunk in the crew quarters, shivering under a thin sheet one moment and kicking it off the next. His skin, which had been pink, was now flushed a deep red. Every joint ached. A dull, deep throb in his shoulders, elbows, and knees. Mira monitored him from the bridge. His bio readings, still active on her screen, were a wild dance. His core temperature was dangerously high for a Veltrani, but the human baseline marker blinked beside it, indicating it was within his species' elevated response parameters. His white blood cell count was still climbing. It was as if his body, having repelled the initial invasion, was now conducting exhaustive war games, making sure it remembered every detail of the enemy. She walked down to his quarters. The door was open. Jean was sitting on the edge of his bunk, head in his hands. A sheen of sweat covered his back. "You should be in the medical bay," Mira said from the doorway. Jean looked up. His eyes were glassy with fever, but he managed a weak smile. "And scare Luna? She thinks I'm a monster already. Hearing me groan in the next bed wouldn't help." He coughed, a wetter sound now. "It's just the process. My body is cleaning house. It's messy. What can I do?" Mira asked. The question felt strange. She was a commander used to solving problems with procedure and technology. This was a problem of biology, of ancient, chaotic fire burning inside her crewmen. "Water," Jean said simply. "Lots of it. And time." So Mira brought him water. Day, having finished his watch over Luna, appeared in the doorway later with a large, protein-rich nutrient bar from his own supplies. "Eat," the big engineer said, placing it on Jin's small table. "Your systems are burning energy. Fuel them." It was the most practical form of care he could offer. For 2 days, the Quantum orbited the silent, red world. Luna's condition slowly stabilized. The burns in her airways began the long Selenian process of precise, careful healing. She could speak in a whisper. Her first question to Mira was about Jean. What is he? Mira tried to explain the scan data. Luna, a medic, listened. The concept of a body treating cyanide compounds as a mild metabolic challenge made her transparent eyelids blink rapidly in distress. "It is not medicine," she whispered. "It is violence." Inside him, on the 3rd day, Jin's fever broke. The deep redness faded from his skin, leaving him looking pale and washed out, but clear-eyed. The ache in his joints settled into a stiffness that eased as he moved. He showered, the water washing away the last salty traces of his sickness. He put on fresh clothes and went to see Luna. He stood outside her quarantine barrier. She was sitting up now, the respirator replaced by a simple oxygen tube under her nose. She saw him and went very still. "Hey," Jean said, his voice back to its normal tone, though still a little rough. "Hello," Luna whispered back. She studied him as if seeing a new species of crystal. "You are well." "I am," he said. "How are you feeling?" "The pain is less." She paused, her large eyes searching his. "Mira showed me the scans. Your biology, it attacked the planet." Jean gave a small, tired laugh. "I suppose it did. It attacks everything. Sometimes it attacks me. I once spent 3 days in a medical bay because my body decided to violently reject the harmless pollen in the air filters of Selene Station. My mighty immune system laid me flat with a fever worse than this one over a bit of flower dust." Luna processed this. The mightiest defensive system she had ever seen was also flawed, unpredictable. So it is not a shield. It is a wild animal you carry inside. "That's a good way to put it," Jean said, nodding. "A loyal, fierce, sometimes stupid animal. It's great against things that want to kill you quickly. Not so great for a peaceful, stable life." He tapped the clear barrier gently. "I'm glad you're healing, Luna. I'm so sorry you were hurt." Her expression softened, the fear receding. He was not a monster. He was just a man with a wild animal inside. An animal that, on Bittergale, had been very useful. That evening, Mira called a full crew meeting in the mess hall. Luna attended via audio from medical. They all had the same unspoken question hanging in the air. "What happens now?" Mira spoke first. "The official mission log will state that Luna's suit was breached during a severe weather event. It will state that Jin's suit was also compromised during the rescue, suffering helmet fracture. It will state we executed a successful emergency retreat. Our biological data will be filed under Extreme Environment Survivability, Human Subset. It will be classified." Day grunted in approval. Luna's soft voice came from the speaker. "It is wise. Such knowledge could be used poorly." They all looked at Jean. He was the secret. He was the fact that defied galaxies of understanding. Jean looked at his hands on the table. "I agree," he said quietly. "It's not a weapon. It's not a superpower. It's a condition. If people saw it as a strength, they'd send humans to terrible places, expecting miracles. And we'd die there, eventually, because this," he gestured to himself, "is just a frantic, messy struggle. It fails as often as it succeeds." He looked at Mira. "The galaxy pities species like yours for needing perfect environments. They call you fragile. But you build civilizations that last 100,000 years in your gentle seas and calm atmospheres. You create perfect, lasting beauty. My people, we just survive. We build shelters against the storm. We patch things up. We move on. Our beauty is in the struggle, not in the perfection. It's a much quieter, harder thing to see." Mira understood. The universe had it backwards. Stability was the true strength. Chaos was the desperate, if sometimes spectacular, alternative. "So," Day said, breaking the quiet, "we saw what we saw. We keep it to ourselves. And we go home." Jean nodded. "And the next time we find a death world." He began. Mira finished the thought, a slight, weary smile on her face. "We will still wear our hazmat suits. All of us. No exceptions." The meeting ended. Jean walked to the observation lounge. Bittergale filled the viewport, a vast, swirling marble of corrosive beauty. It was no longer a hellscape to him. It was just a place, a very bad place. He placed a hand against the cool glass. His body had fought its chaos and, for now, won. The animal inside was settling, resting, waiting for the next threat. He remembered the sting of the wind, the burn in his lungs. He remembered the smell of his grandmother's farm after the thaw. The two memories were now woven together. Not a triumph, but a connection. a quiet understanding between one stubborn, chaotic thing and another. The journey back into the heart of explored space was quiet. The blue swirl of the nearest slipstream gate grew in the viewport, a gentle and known thing after the violent red of Bittergale. On the quantum, a new normal settled in, woven around the unspoken event. Luna was released from quarantine. Her breathing was a soft whistle, and her voice would likely never regain its former musical quality. She moved slowly, conserving her energy. When she passed Jean in the corridor, she no longer flinched. She would offer a small, careful smile. He would return a nod. Their bond was not one of shared victory, but of shared trauma survived in opposite ways. Day treated Jean exactly the same as before, which was the highest compliment he could give. He still rumbled about Jin's flimsy human engineering when a console panel stuck, but now there was a flicker in his eyes, a recognition that the human's interior engineering was bafflingly robust. He had seen the evidence with his own eyes. Mira was the one who changed the most. Her command was still precise, but her certainty had been sanded down, replaced by a watchful curiosity. She spent hours reviewing the scan data from the planet, not just the geological logs, but Jin's biological readouts. She wasn't looking for secrets anymore. She was trying to understand a different kind of logic. One afternoon, she found Jean in the small gym. He was not using the weight machines designed for Day. He was simply moving through a series of slow, flowing stretches, his face beaded with sweat from the effort. He was regaining his flexibility, working the last of the stiffness from his joints. "May I ask you a question?" Mira said, leaning against the doorway. Jean finished a stretch and straightened up, wiping his forehead with a towel. "Of course. On Bittergale, when you first breathed the air, you said it felt like spring." She paused, choosing her words. "Was that a lie? To calm us?" Jean thought about it. He picked up a water bulb and took a long drink. "No," he said finally. "It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either." He sat on a bench, motioning for her to join him. "The feeling, the sting on my face, the bite in my lungs, it was physically familiar. It triggered a memory, a good memory, but my mind wasn't ignoring the danger. It was using the memory. My body was in a fight. My mind offered it a reason to feel that fight as something normal, even something positive. It's a trick, an old human trick." Mira considered this, a biological response paired with a psychological one. Not a shield, but a story the body told itself to endure. "So you were not unafraid?" "I was terrified," Jean said plainly. "When my visor cracked, I thought I was dead. But then I wasn't. And the memory came. It wasn't courage. It was a path through the panic. A reminder that my body had handled harshness before." He looked at her, his dark eyes earnest. "Your people, Mira, when faced with a threat, you have the wisdom to build a perfect barrier against it. You see the problem and you design a flawless solution. My people, when faced with a threat, we often have to go through it. We don't have time to build the perfect barrier. So we tell ourselves stories. We remember other times we survived. It's messy and it doesn't always work. But it's what we have." Mira nodded slowly. The human superpower was even stranger than she thought. It wasn't just chaotic biology. It was chaotic psychology supporting it. A survival mechanism built not on eliminating danger, but on normalizing it. Later that cycle, the four of them ate a meal together in the mess hall for the first time since the incident. Luna picked at her food, her appetite still small. Day consumed his in quiet, efficient bites. The silence was comfortable, but it was also waiting to be broken. Luna was the one who broke it. Her soft, damaged voice carried across the table. "Jean," she said, "thank you for helping Day carry me." Jean set his utensils down. "You don't have to thank me." "I do," she insisted, her large eyes holding his. I am afraid of what you are. But I am grateful to the person who used it to help me." It was the acknowledgement they had all been avoiding. The thing that made Jean different was now a part of their shared history. Day leaned back, his chair groaning. "It raises a question," he said. "For the next mission, If we find another poison world, or a radiation belt, or a bacterial soup, do we send you out in shorts to test the air? He meant it as a joke, but the question underneath was real. Gene shook his head, a firm, definitive motion.
No.
Absolutely not. What happened was a lucky accident. My body won that fight. The next one might be the one where it gets overwhelmed, where the toxin is just a little different or the pathogen a little faster. My gift is unreliable. It is not a tool. It is a gamble. He looked at each of them. The real strength of this crew is that we have your precision, Mira. Your strength, Day. Your sensitivity, Luna. And my adaptability. But only when we use them together with the best technology we have. My walk outside was a failure of our technology. It was not a demonstration of human superiority. It was a reminder of human desperation. The slipstream gate engulfed the ship, and the stars streaked into lines of blue-white light. They were going home. Bittergale was behind them, a red scar in the data logs. Mira finally understood the full picture. The galaxy might one day learn about humanity's baffling toughness. They might see humans walking where others could not. They might call it strength. But she had seen the cost. The fever, the ache, the chaotic, exhausting war inside. She had seen the look in Jin's eyes when he spoke of it. Not pride, but a weary respect for a dangerous, ancient companion he could never truly control. Humanity's power was not that they could conquer hell's capes. It was that they could recognize a piece of hell in a spring breeze and keep walking anyway. It was a humble, terrifying, and deeply lonely kind of strength. And she was glad, fiercely glad, that Jean was on her crew. The Quantum slid into its assigned docking cradle at Selene Orbital with a soft, final thump. The mission was over. Through the viewports, the clean, graceful lines of the station gleamed under steady, artificial sun lamps. Ships from a dozen species drifted in orderly traffic lanes. It was a vision of controlled, peaceful civilization. Inside the ship, the crew went through the motions of shutdown. Day powered down the main engines with a series of heavy, satisfying clicks. Luna carefully backed up the medical logs, her hands moving slowly but surely. Mira began composing the official mission summary on her command pad. Her report was clean, precise, and omitted the most important truth they had learned. Gene packed his personal kit. He folded the standard-issue gray undersuit, the one he'd worn under his hazmat gear on Bittergale. He paused, holding the fabric. It held no stains, no smell of that alien place. His body had done all the work and had since renewed itself. He packed it away. The debriefing with the Galactic Survey Authority officials was exactly as they expected. Took place in a smooth, white room. Two officials, a Veltrani like Mira and a slender Selenian, asked polite, procedural questions. They expressed sympathy for Luna's injury and noted the unfortunate suit failure that had also compromised Jin's gear. They praised the crew's adherence to emergency protocol. And the atmospheric samples from the crystalline structures? The Veltrani official asked, looking at her screen. Contained and ready for analysis, Sector Blue, Mira answered smoothly. They show a unique mineral weathering cycle. The full data is in the log. The official nodded, satisfied. The story was believed because it was sensible. Technology had failed as it sometimes did. Crews had reacted as they were trained. No one thought to ask if a human could breathe the poison. The question was absurd. After the debriefing, the crew had one last meal together in the station's commissary. The air here was filtered to a bland, inoffensive neutrality. The food was nutritious and flavorless. People of many species moved quietly around them, going about their safe, predictable lives. Day raised a bulb of thick, nutritious fluid. To a successful mission, he rumbled, and to walking away from it. They touched their bulbs together. The moment was warm, but it was also a farewell. They would be assigned to different ships, different missions. The secret of Bittergale would be a thread between them, but life would move on. Luna was the first to leave, giving them each a gentle nod before walking away toward the healing gardens, where the air was scented with calming spores. Day clapped Jean on the back with a careful, measured force. Try not to fall into any more atmospheres, Little human. I'll do my best, Jean said, smiling. Then it was just Mira and Jean, watching the traffic through the large observation window. What will you do now? Mira asked. They're sending me to a library world, Jean said. Arch-Eva 3. Stable climate. Controlled biosphere. I'll be helping to categorize xenobiological data from 100 different forest worlds. He smiled a little.
No sandstorms.
No acid rain. It sounds peaceful, Mira said. It does, Jean agreed, but his eyes, looking out at the stars, held a faint, unreadable distance. Mira understood. Peace was the goal for everyone else. For him, it was just another environment to navigate. His inner animal would grow bored, restless. It might even turn on him, finding harmless pollen to fight. His strength was also his burden. You will always have a place on any crew I command, Jean, she said quietly. It was the highest offer she could make. Thank you, Mira, he said, and he meant it. That means more than you know. He picked up his kit and turned to go. He took a few steps, then stopped. He looked back at her, not as a commander to her crewmen, but as one being who had glimpsed the core of another. You asked me once if it felt like spring was a lie, he said. It wasn't, but I should have finished the thought. He gazed past her, as if seeing that crimson horizon again. On my grandmother's farm, that spring wind, it was a welcome relief from the deep cold, but it wasn't gentle, carried the last bite of winter. It warned you that the thaw would bring mud, and floods, and hard work. It promised life, but a hard, messy, fighting kind of life. He met her eyes. That's what it felt like. Not a victory, a warning, and a promise. Then he nodded once and walked away, blending into the crowd of other beings in their clean, safe clothes. Mira stood alone at the window for a long time. She looked at the orderly stars, the clean lines of the station, the predictable, safe universe she had helped build. She thought of perfect barriers and stable civilizations lasting 100,000 years, and for the first time, she felt a pang of something that was not fear, not pity, but a profound and humbling awe. Humanity would never build the perfect, eternal city. They would always be out in the messy, dangerous thaw, fighting the mud, feeling the sting of the wind, telling themselves stories to make the struggle feel like spring. That it was not a better way. It was a harder one. And as she watched a ship depart from its docking berth, heading out into the unknown dark, she wondered if perhaps the galaxy needed both kinds of strength. The kind that built perfect havens, and the kind, quiet and desperate, that could simply step outside into a storm and survive.